Welcome to Worm's Eye View number 2. This one's going to be called episode number 2. This one's going to be called Artemis Starship and Orion, or maybe Crew Dragon. Worm's Eye View is a thought series by MistaHella. I just come on here and I talk about things from the bottom up. A lot of times, in a lot of these podcasts, streams of consciousness people put out is from the top down. I wanted to do something from the bottom up. So, today, our first episode was about Artemis. It was more of an essay I wrote. This one is going to be in a format of a discussion. It's going to be, these thought series episodes is going to be a mixed bag. Now, I can't express how excited I am about the Artemis missions. Artemis 4 is going to be ambitious, to say the least. It's going to be one more step before we land on the moon. No, this is going to be after that. So Artemis 3 is going to be when we go to Earth's orbit and they experiment with all the different landers and docking, undocking, things like that, and hopefully spacesuits fitting, and maybe a moonwalk or two. Crossing our fingers for that. But Artemis 4 is when we land on the moon. Frankly, I don't think the Chinese are going to wait that long. I think they're going to move up their timeline in a surprise way. Kind of like they're going to fake us out. I think they are going to try to pretend like they are going to do a Artemis moon mission where they go around the moon and come back, but I think maybe that mission might be an actual moon landing attempt. Which will be interesting. Or if not a moon landing attempt, it will be to one up the Artemis. Maybe they will orbit the moon. And these my little astronauts. Okay, so let's talk about it. Artemis 4, the original plan, and then I'm going to talk about something that's been on my mind, another plan. Okay, so Artemis 4 is kind of tricky. We have the Earth here. And we have Starship. This is the NASA plan. But before we have Starship, let's take that off the board. Before we have Starship, we have something that's more important than Starship, and that is the tanker stage. Let's call this the depot. The issue with Starship is that it has to be refueled in order to make the trip to the moon, because in order to escape Earth, it will use up all its fuel just to get into Earth's orbit. You have to top up before you go to the moon. How will you do that? You have to refuel with a tanker. This tanker, I believe, can hang out in Earth's orbit for months on end if they do it right, with all the insulation and everything to minimize boil off and all that. I don't know how they're going to get the energy to keep the fuel cool and everything, but whatever the case, it has to be able to last in orbit for a long time. So the depot will go into orbit, and then you start sending up other starships to top off the depot. According to some podcasts and other people that did the math, this can be anywhere from 20 to 16 launches, right? But SpaceX has a cheat code, and that cheat code is their towers. They have 2 towers in Texas now, and then they want to have 2 towers in Florida that they're building. That means that they can launch 4 at a time, or 4 in quick succession. You know, one day they launch one, another day they launch one. Now, this cadence is not strange to SpaceX because they launch like 2 a week, Falcon 9s. And sometimes they launch Falcon Heavies, right? So they're not a stranger to high cadence. This is doable for them. And then, but you have to ask yourself, what about the tankers? Now, when you refuel the depot, when you fuel the depot up, the tanker is going to have to come back to Earth. And you'll be like, oh, well, they got to turn around the tankers. But no, because SpaceX will have maybe like 20 of these tankers in the wings, waiting. And they're building high bays now. They're building a high bay in Florida, and then another high bay in Texas that can hold up to 20. So you can have 40 of these ships waiting around to be launched. So you don't necessarily have to refly the tankers that came back. This is why I think Elon was talking about he didn't want to try to catch with a Starship until Starship can come back without exploding in the water. Because if they can recover these in the water, that splash, if they can splash down and recover them, they can refurbish them back at the base and launch new ones. So you can say to yourself, well, they can just keep launching new starships until they fill up the depot. And they would never have to use a refurbished tanker ever for a trip to the moon. They could just fly new ones and then refurbish the old ones that come back for the next launch for the moon. That's like in a year or so, or 6 months. But if they can land in the water without exploding, no big deal. For the time new tankers fill up the depot, it's ready to go. Okay. So now that we are in the now that we are in now that we have the depot fueled up, ready to go, ready to rock, we can send up Starship. Send up the Starship. It spends all its fuel to get out to escape Earth. And now we can fuel up Starship from the depot. And I'm thinking that the depot can wait in orbit for a long time. I don't know how long, but for a long time where it's not really that critical for it to come up because it's in holding. And you can think that what if SpaceX has more than one depot in orbit? Why are we limiting ourselves to one depot? But I think that's for the future, right? You can have up to 4 depots in orbit, just waiting around, if they can hold their fuel without boil off, or they call it boil off, but I don't know what it is. But somehow, being in space, the fuel gets warmer and it boils off somehow. Goes back to another form. So I don't know what that is, but that's what they say. So now that we have our depot, we no longer need our depot anymore. Now we can send up Orion on the SLS. So the SLS comes into play, and Orion comes into play. This is our astronauts. Let's bring in our astronauts. And I have a cute picture for the astronauts. These are astronauts. They come up. So now we have the Starship, and now we have the astronauts up in orbit where we all want them, in space. Space is the place. The SLS brings it up, which is single use. You're going to get one shot with that. Orion comes to Starship. The astronauts come over to Starship. They're going to have fun in Starship because it's a really big place compared to Orion, the way hopefully they will have toilets that work. If not, they have 2 sets of toilets. Oh, that'd be amazing, right? You have you have 2 toilets. So 2 people can use the bathroom at different times, which is cool. Now that you have everybody together, now it's time to go to the moon with everything connecting. So you have the crew, you have Orion, you have Starship. They all get on board together. They come over to the moon, to moon's orbit. And now Starship disconnects from Orion, comes down to the moon. The astronauts do their business on the moon, have fun, doom buggying around, right? Plant a flag, maybe bring some equipment down, leave some stuff off, and then they come back to the Starship. The Starship comes back to Orion. The crew comes over to Orion, and then Orion takes the crew back to Earth and they splash down. That is the plan. You think it's convoluted, but it's really not. So, what happens to the Starship? I don't know. I don't know what happens to the Starship in the moon's orbit. Be cool if they could just stay in orbit. If they can, double duty the HLS Starship. I don't know. Yeah, this is supposed to be white, I believe, but but this got me to thinking, Artemis 4 has to go this way because you have legacy equipment that you have to use because you already have it. It's like, let's say you buy some land, but the land has a historical barn on it. You can't really tear it down. You want to build a new house on the land, but you can't tear down the barn, so you still have the barn. This is the barn that you have from the old leftover equipment. So you have to use that because a lot of stuff is connected to this. You have the Europeans, you have Canada, everybody's kind of connected to that. So you have to use these up. Okay. But in the meantime, after Artemis 4, SpaceX really don't have to wait around. They can do other missions in the meantime. Starship was supposed to launch yesterday, but it didn't. But during the build up to the launch, they have this presentation that they do. SpaceX does, and they had a guy picked out to do a flyby of the moon on a Starship, and another. He's also going to Mars, which we haven't even talked about yet, which is way, beyond. So he's going to do a 2-year trip to Mars and back, which is awesome. It's a nice experiment to do, just find out what happens to the human body. On the worst case scenario, where you have to go out there and come back, but in my opinion, once you learn how to land on a moon, you can land on other moons. You know, you don't necessarily have to go to a planet. You can land on other moons in our solar system. And we have moon bases all over our solar system, which would be cool. Or space stations. If once you make it to space, you know, half the battle is won. Why not occupy space with that has the least, you know, resistance? Why even deal with gravity if you're not prepared to deal with that? You know, high gravity, I would say. Because getting into space is the hard part, but the space part, even though it's full of radiation and debris and all kind of other stuff, it really is much easier just to stay in space and do things if you can figure out how to shield from, you know, other things, micrometeorites and stuff. Okay, so my other plan that I was thinking about, meaning that SpaceX don't have to wait around for NASA to do other missions, is something I like to call Artemis 4.25. Okay, so because really the goal is for Starship to do everything, but Starship is not ready for that yet, right? How do we utilize Starship by itself now? Right? Let's take SLS off the board and let's take Orion off the board. Let's say we don't have those. What do we have? What does SpaceX have? And y'all know what they have, right? They have Super Heavy and they have Crew Dragon and Falcon 9. This, I think, you know, you get to space and the tankers and stuff through Super Heavy and Starship combined, and then you launch your crew with Crew Dragon. And then Crew Dragon docks with Starship. Docks with Starship. The crew comes over, but you don't have to take. I mean, you can do the same mission with Crew Dragon, but I don't think you have to. I think you can just don't land Crew Dragon. Send Crew Dragon to park at the space station and wait for them to come back. Remember, space is the place. Keep everything in space as much as you can. Everything's easier in space, dealing with all this stuff. So now you can just go to the moon with Starship and then come back to Starship with Starship and dock with Dragon from the space station. Crew comes over, splash down as normal, right? Because Crew Dragon does this trip from the space station all the time. Now the only problem is You are out of fuel when you come up from the moon. How do you deal with that? I don't know. That's the issue. How do you deal with being out of fuel when you come up from the moon? Now, there's two ways to do it, right? Because you can do the free return thing, but even if you do the free return thing like Orion did, you're still coming back too fast to slow down so that you can get your crew onto tow just far enough into the water, into Earth's orbit to slow down, using the atmosphere of Earth to slow down a little bit, to slow down so that Crew Dragon to ISS speeds, and you can dock with Crew Dragon, and then the astronauts come back as normal. That's one way. The other way is depots, right? Since you have multiple depots already, you send one out to the moon. When the crew comes up from the moon's surface, they refuel. Now they have enough fuel where they can do everything they want to do. They can slow down, they can chill out in the moon orbit if they want to, they can come back to the Earth and chill out in the Earth orbit if they want to. You have fuel to do that stuff. And then the Crew Dragon comes over, and it'd be cool if the Crew Dragon can fuel there too. And now you could do that. The only part of that is that it's kind of dangerous to fuel while the crew is still on board. That's the only part that's dangerous, I think, for that one. So those are two ways that you can do that. Now, maybe in Artemis 4.5, you can take this idea a little further, where right now NASA is talking about using private corporations to build space stations in space. I think that they should combine a space station. They should combine a space station with a gas station. So a gas station, space station, right? So my idea is that instead of, let's group these. Instead of having a tanker, which is it's okay idea, but I think they can improve that idea and build a space station that houses people as well, but it's also a gas station where you have the people on board. It's high risk, right? It's a high risk endeavor, but I think it's a good idea where you have a gas station, space station, where you have a space station, that can do experiments and everything else, but also be a place where Starship can come and dock to refuel. And these tankers just come and park instead of coming back to Earth, splashing down and stuff. They come and park, and they wait instead of spending all their energy fueling a depot. You can just park these, park in this station and fuel up, right? And just have the starship that's waiting there. And when they're done fueling, you can have them lined up, like they do at gas stations on Earth. You have the tankers that come in and they fuel up, and you see them. You be there pumping gas, and the people there in the trucks, right there, putting gas inside of the gas station. Same thing with this. You could just you know, you have one that goes out, have a bay open, and then a new one comes in, and you just use the same mechanisms that Starship used to refuel to fuel up the Starship. This way you don't have a depot. You don't have like you can just do that, and that, I think that'll work much better, because then you could have all these tankers lined up waiting to get to the space station to fuel up the starships, and then the starship can just go boop. Then the starship can just go to the moon, after fueling up, and just have this this tango line of the system assembly line kind of idea, and then boom, and then you have a whole industry in space of space gas stations, and you have people on board, astronauts that can do this very important job of fueling up starships. And they could be on board doing experiments and stuff, and then as well as this, and then they can also have a place where astronauts can hang out, go on board and do different things, and then come back. All right, and I guess that would be Artemis 4.5. And I guess that's my idea. Artemis 4.25, and then maybe Artemis 4.5, dealing with that, because I know that the goal is to get to Mars in a starship by itself, right? And have more than 4 people on board. But before we get to that stage, I think that we can have a thriving, I would call it a building up. I think that we need to build up the astronaut class of people, where it is an occupation, a thriving occupation that people can go into. Right now, that number is really low, but I think that more people would choose that path if we have more people in space doing work. And this is one way to encourage that, where they can go into space and be a space station technician that handles refueling starships and stuff. That's going out further out into the galaxy. But not only starships. If you do it in the right way, it can fuel up anything, any satellite. Satellites can come there to get refueled. You can do all kind of things. They can. It's really, I think, a very robust architecture that you can do. So that's my idea. It's probably dumb, but I'm very excited about I underscore this by saying that I am very excited about the Artemis plan and the different things that we can do. And we haven't even talked about the moon base, which is cool. But I want to emphasize that space is the place. The moon base is cool, which I'm rooting for. But I think we can do a lot more in space than we're doing. Keep things in space, and it'd be a thriving place, because once we can travel from planet to planet, from moon to moon, and we can stay in space. We don't necessarily have to go down to the planet surface. I think that we should avoid heavy gravity situations if we can right now, until we figure out how to land. Also, too, I want to point out that even with landing, I think there is a possibility that nobody really talk about, and that is the towers, that the catching towers, which I think is another piece of architecture that maybe in 4.5, or even maybe Artemis 5, that we need to really talk about, where what if we built a tower on the moon? Can you imagine? Now you don't even have to think about landing legs. Just comes to the moon, the tower catches it, right? Is taken to a high bay on the moon, build a high bay as well on the moon, and people can disembark from there. I think if you go from catching tower to catching tower, that would be awesome, right? It'd be easier to catch, I think, on the moon than it is on Earth. Now you don't have to worry about landing legs anymore. You can have landing legs just in case something goes wrong. But I think that building a tower on the moon, multiple towers, would be just awesome. Okay, that's my lame brain idea. I hope you enjoyed it. It was fun to talk about. So for the 2 people that's watching, thank you for watching.